Well, I'm going to ask you to do what I ask everyone to do whenever I stand in front of a group of people. Everybody stand up. Everybody stand up. Everybody stand up. Everybody. Now, can I get you to clap your hands? I've done that in a nightclub, and plenty of them. I've done that in churches, community centers, and corporate meetings. I've done that everywhere. Because I think it's very important for us to remember who we are, who we were created to be, and the potential that we have. When you're growing up, a lot of times if you're talented or you're good at something, you have people telling you, you're great, you're smart, you're talented, you're strong, you're this, you're that. But as you get older and older, you notice those compliments kind of shrink down. And so I think it's very important to remind ourselves, especially in those times when things aren't going well, or we don't feel smart, or don't feel talented, or don't feel like we are in control of things, that we are somebody and we can succeed. And another reason why I do that is because that is what empowers me to continue to do what I do. I am an entrepreneur. I started a company about 10 years ago called OnCast Media, and in its first iteration, it was a media buying and marketing firm. As a young man, I made a decision in high school that I didn't really like school that much. I didn't like school so much that I graduated a year early. I did not have a senior year. I finished up all my classes my junior year and said, I'm done. I'm done with school. I'm passionate about some things, and I really want to chase those things, and I want to see how big it can get. And I want to kind of measure myself in 4 years, see where my peers are, what they're doing, what kind of jobs do they have, what kind of money are they making, am I making the same kind of money? And if it works out with them going to school and me not going to school, I'll continue down that path. If it works out that I see that they're doing things that I can't do and experiencing a life I can't experience, then I will divert and try to go back down that path. So 10 years later, I make the decision, man, I've tried a lot of things, I've done a lot of things, I've succeeded at some, I've failed at some. Now it's time for me to think about going to school. But before I made that decision to go back to school, I made one of the most important decisions I ever made in my life. And that decision was the decision to start my own company and become an entrepreneur. That journey, I learned a number of lessons throughout that journey. The number one lesson that I learned is don't ask permission. An entrepreneur does not ask permission. Sometimes it gets them in trouble, but many times, more than not, it actually liberates them and liberates the people around them. When I started my company, OnCast Media, I started it from the ground up. I went around to mom and pop shops and really just asked them questions about what are you doing for marketing? How are you advertising your business? And I began thinking of ideas right there on the spot of how I could help more people know about their business and get the word out about their products and their services. That grew into a point where I had an opportunity to serve bigger and more established clients. I began to make the decision that I will become more legit and that I would do business in a way that there was a paper trail, and so that there was a way that people could respect my business and that people would pay me a lot more money because they saw how established I was. That business grew into the point where I found myself a couple of years being invited out to the BET Awards in Los Angeles. And while at the BET Awards, it was almost like a spiritual time because I began to think, look at Casey. Little nappy head Casey. Little running around the hood with dirty shoes and you could smell his feet through his shoes Casey. You're sitting here with people who are literally running an industry. Not just the entertainers. Yeah, the entertainers were there. But the people behind the entertainers, the billionaires that were controlling the visuals that you see, the music that you hear, I just began to think, wow, how did I end up here? If they knew that I have never stepped foot in a college classroom, if they understood that my path has been anything but traditional, that I have no what they call formal training in what I'm doing, but I'm actually doing my second lesson, is that one thing entrepreneurs do that is very important, that everyone should learn to do, is make stuff up. Entrepreneurs make stuff up. It is very important to learn that skill, because if you don't know how to make stuff up, then that means that you cannot be a creator. That means you can only deal with what someone gives to you in the arrangement and with the restrictions that they give it to you. But entrepreneurs make stuff up, meaning that we may not know how to solve a problem, but when we don't know how to solve a problem, we try to find someone who is solving the problem. And if they're doing a good job, we do what they do. If they're not doing a good job, we find a way around getting the job done. So two of those lessons that I learned really helped me begin to make a name for my business. And it continued to grow, and it grew to a point to where I worked on the 2008 presidential campaign, and the campaign that I was working on was responsible or played a small part in turning a Republican state Democratic for the first time in history up and down the slate. And it was a great sense of accomplishment to be able to work on that. But it also introduced me to the third lesson that I learned, is that no matter what you do in life, you may not like it, it may not sound good, but you will fail. And I'm not saying that you will be a failure. I'm saying you will experience failures in your journey. After my business reached, it felt like a pinnacle. It swiftly went down. And I experienced the other side of not being accomplished, of not succeeding, of not achieving my goals. And things got really bad really quickly. My family ended up on welfare. I ended up going to local charities, begging them to help my family out so that we could do the simple things like eat, the simple things like have somewhere to live, the simple things like have a telephone so that I can get calls back for jobs that I'm applying to. So during this time, I experienced something that I never, ever wanted to experience, but it was my first business failure. It took me about a year and a half to find a job after my business failed, and it took me maybe about 2 to 3 years to kind of recover from that whole experience. We had our car repossessed, a lot of things happened, and maybe about 2 to 3 years later, it felt like now we can pay our bills, we don't really need welfare like that, and we're able to get back on our feet. But that experience of failure taught me so much, and it was so necessary about my journey, because it gave me an inner drive that I don't ever in my life want to experience that again. And sometimes you have to taste exactly what you don't want to experience to know that's not what you want. And so in that experience, I began to question everything. I began to question, okay, was it me? Was it just my incompetency? Was it that I really didn't know what I was doing? I was just making stuff up? Was it that I didn't go to school? So I began to question all the assumptions that I've been making over the years and trying to pinpoint exactly why did my business fail, or why didn't it continue to grow, and why wasn't I continuing to experience that success that I had grown accustomed to. I don't know that I found all those answers, but what I do know is that I began to look at some other things like, what is it that my business lacks that I see is necessary to be successful? Number one, I had a growing network, but I didn't really have a strong network. So I began to think of, how can I put myself in position so that the next time I go back into business, I'll have a strong network. I know one thing as a bootstrapper is one of the greatest things in the world is to feel self-made and to feel like I took this thing from the bottom and I built something great. But one of the the setbacks to bootstrapping in a business is you have no safety net. So as soon as something goes wrong, you don't have that cushion that you need to get things back right. Because as an entrepreneur, when things go wrong, you don't just quit. You don't just run away. You actually try other things. And you try to reiterate, and you try to pivot. And sometimes those pivots actually save your business and breathe new life into the business. But when you have no cushion, it's hard to actually pivot. And so I began to think of, okay, if I start a business again, I need some cushion. If I start a business again, I need a network. That helped me make my decision when I began to think about schools that I wanted to attend. And when I began to think of universities that I wanted to attend, I wanted to be somewhere that would give me the resources that I would need. I wanted to be somewhere where I could connect with the network that I needed so that the next time I could go after bigger projects and bigger jobs. And so that brings me to the project that I'm working on now. My company wants to create 300,000 jobs on the African continent. We have identified one of the biggest challenges on the African continent is youth unemployment. With youth unemployment rates varying from country to country, going from about 3% in some of the best countries, all the way up to 50% in some of the worst countries. Youth unemployment, it accounts for about 60% of all unemployment on the continent. And unlike the US and the UK, the average person right now in Africa is 19 years old. Whereas the average person in the UK is in their 40s. So Africa is a young continent, it's a vibrant continent, it has tremendous opportunities, but it needs more opportunities for its youth. So we go here to the University of Pennsylvania. If you went to a similar school on the continent of Africa, you could graduate and wonder, where's my job? Where can I work? And you will quickly see that there are not many employers that are looking for African graduates to assume the jobs. And so what we're doing is we're addressing that issue by helping build small businesses on the continent of Africa. And we're doing that by connecting them, making 5 critical connections for small businesses. Connections to critical business content, connections to other entrepreneurs, connections to investors, connections to local events, and connections to local resources. And we believe that if we build strong entrepreneurs who can then hire locally, we can put a dent in youth unemployment. So my journey going through starting the company, that company reaching a pinnacle, that company failing, and me making the decision that I am still an entrepreneur and I still want to pursue my entrepreneur passions and my dreams, led me here to the University of Pennsylvania and led me to begin making connections. Some of the connections that I made helped me to secure a partnership with the Microsoft Corporation, which is the reason why I launched my business. I was actually tapped by the Microsoft Corporation to help out with the Microsoft for Africa initiative that actually invests in young entrepreneurs across the continent. And they were looking for a company to come along and help kind of mentor and provide consulting services to those entrepreneurs. That was in an earlier iteration of our business. Now we're approaching building businesses in a different manner by building a mobile application where entrepreneurs can access business building content in the palm of their hand. But at the end of the day, I wouldn't be doing anything that I'm doing now if I hadn't had those early experiences of, number one, no one told me what my path would be here at the University of Pennsylvania or what I'd be working on. So I had to learn that I didn't need to ask anyone permission for what I wanted to pursue. Number two, I had to free myself enough to make something that I didn't see and create something that wasn't already there, which meant that I needed to make stuff up. Number three, from the time I started re-establish my company in December 2014 till today, we've had maybe 3 or 4 iterations. So guess what? That means we've had at least 3 or 4 failures. And guess what? We're still going. So I understand that failure is a necessary ingredient to having a vibrant and successful business. So if I could leave those things with you, no matter what you do, number one, forget asking permission. Number two, don't be afraid to make stuff up. And number three, when you fail, it's okay. And you're actually going to learn things through that failure, and you're going to be stronger because of it. Thank you for this opportunity.